especially when you take a look at our matchup upcoming. Let's dive in a little bit more, maybe just to the general mechanics of a weather war. Like when we say that, what do we actually mean? Because over the history of VGC, we've seen sand, sun, rain all be very good. Snow now has had its glory days at a certain point, maybe like small peaks and large valleys.
Like, you know, the Gen 4 generations. In 2010, actually, Abomasnow was one of the premier Pokemon because of its ability to, you know, one, change the weather, but two, also match up against Kyogre, which was one of the most common Pokemon. But unfortunately, like, Ice offensively, just not the best in subsequent years, but we've still, you know, seen some success from it. Alolan Ninetales actually in particular was a really strong Pokemon, and you wouldn't like build teams around, you know, spamming ice type attacks. I feel like with other weathers, right, it's like you have something that can really take advantage of the weather and like boost its speed, right? Whether it be things like Ludicolo and Kingdra back in the day, now it's Basket Legion, for example, with Rain. Sun, there were so many photosynthesis users. But yeah, to answer your question, a lot about it is these weather users enable other Pokemon, right? So you see Kian's team here, it enables the Hisuian Typhlosion, enables the Jumpluff, and you look at Jeudy's team, well, you've got the Basket Legion, you've got the Archaludon, you've got the Salamence with Hurricane as well. So you often want your weather out on the field so that your partner Pokemon can really take advantage of it.
But I am noticing that, like, there is speed on the table, right? When you take a look at both Kian as well as Jeudy's team, you are looking at an opportunity here to go for Tailwind. Actually, I lied about that. The speed is really from, like, the Tailwind on the Jumpluff, but also just the speed of something like the Swift Swim on the Basket Legion.
Yeah. Both users actually have Tailwind, so you're not lying, Rose. You're totally saying the truth.
I'm just blind.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting here is basically, like, you have speed control, and then you also have Pokemon that, like, just take advantage of the speed or take advantage because of the weather, right? So it's like, you can make something turbo fast. Right, like imagine Jumpluff in Sun under Tailwind. On Jeudy's side, imagine Basket Legion in Tailwind with Swift Swim, you know, under Rain as well. And I think Kian's team is really exciting to look at here because you've got that Choice Specs Typhlosion, and there's also a Fisher Torkoal there, by the way.
That is, so if things get really rough, I mean, where you really just want to try to take a KO swiftly, then you can gamble a little bit on the Fissure hitting. But I think that the Dragonite, as you called out, was something like Incineroar maybe not necessarily being as prevalent in the meta, or something that maybe people think that they can have a better answer for. That Dragonite is multi-scale alongside that Assault Vest, so a really great way for you to withstand a lot of those water type attacks.
Totally, yeah, I think Assault Vest Dragonite was something that some people have used, like Choice Span is very common as an item, but with Assault Vest and multi-skill, you're just so much bulkier than people are used to. Of course, there's the Jumpluff here as well. Jumpluff is a huge nuisance because of its ability to just put things to sleep with that sleep powder. Encore obviously being a really disruptive move as well. And, you know, Jumpluff here offensively can actually be quite scary. Imagine just Leaf Storming right into that Basket Legion. It also gives you the immunity to Amoonguss' Spore here. As we see Kian's lower third there. He loves extreme speed. I actually fought against Kian a bunch in the previous season. I know he was a big user of that Choice Band Dragonite. And so, yeah, he has now using the Assault Vest Dragonite, but of course still has the extreme speed on it.
Well, that's another important thing to call out, I think, for these teams, is that while you do have the opportunity to go turbo mode on some of these Pokemon, you also have a way to bypass that, which would be through these priority moves. Extreme speed on the Dragonite, you also have Sucker Punch on the King Gambit, and taking a look at Jeudy's team, not really too different in that regard. You've got Aqua Jet here on the Basket Legion, as well as a Sucker Punch on your own King Gambit.
Yeah, Jeudy running it back with Rain. He loves this archetype. Managed to do very well at the San Diego Regional Championships in the beginning of Scarlet and Violet, and he now has some upgrades. In the previous version of his team, back then, he had Golden Go as well as Palafin. Palafin, unfortunately, feels a little bit weaker in this format. Golden Go is still really solid, but Jeudy is upgraded with that Basket Legion as well as that Archaludon. Archaludon, I think, a big Pokemon to pay attention to in this matchup. If in the rain, it can be a huge threat. One of the things I'm actually really curious about in this matchup is going to be the Assault Vest Dragonite into that Archaludon, because if you normal Terra the Assault Vest, you've got multi-skill and Assault Vest. It can be a huge nuisance for Archaludon, and the Dragonite here has the low kick and Stomping Tantrum, so, you know, multiple different ways to hit Archaludon for super effective damage. If Archaludon goes for the Grass Terra, the Dragonite here also has the Ice Spinner, and if you commit the Terra, then Hisuian Typhlosion, even Torkoal can hit you for super effective damage. And then the one other interesting thing about Jeudy's team is you have that low kick on King Gambit. Sometimes you'll see Sword Stance or Iron Head, for example. Low kick here can give you actually a big edge against Kian's King Gambit, which of course does not have low kick.
Yeah, it is going to be the Iron Head instead. So maybe something that you could look at, but there's really nothing on Jeudy's team that's going to actually take too much damage from that move. If you know that you're faster, maybe you can try to fish for something like a flinch, but we see Jeudy's fun fact is mom is currently watching at home. Hi, Mom. Hi, Jeudy's mom.
Thank you for watching,
Yes.
and thank you to all the parents, of course, who tune in, who support their children competing in VGC, bringing them to tournaments. Parents are such a big part of this scene and this ecosystem, so that is absolutely awesome. And this is a match that you honestly could see being the finals of the tournament, right? Once again, both of these players made really deep runs into the World Championships in Day 2 this year, and it's just so fun. Like, Weather Wars have been such a staple of VGC, whether it be Groudon versus Kyogre, for example, Politoed versus Ninetales. And here we go. We're just going to get things started. Salamence and King Gambit from one side, and the Hisuian Typhlosion has hit the field.
Wow, okay, so we're going to see the Intimidate come out here from the Salamence, but it's not going to matter onto either the Jumpluff or the Typhlosion as two special attackers. But there is a lot of speed now on Kian's side. Jeudy bringing out this King Gambit, though, you do have an opportunity to try to hit this Typhlosion first with something like the Sucker Punch.
Yeah, Sucker Punch is a huge deal right now. So if you're Kian, you can obviously get around that by switching Typhlosion or going for that Terra immediately. But do you want to commit your Terra here? I think Jeudy having a really nice lead where the Typhlosion just doesn't exert as much pressure as it would want, right? Especially with Salamence being able to resist Fire-type attack as well. But looks like Kian willing to just lock into Overheat here, so Jeudy just goes for a Sucker Punch. That could be really, really nasty. But King Gambit's going to protect here.
Okay, so just playing it safe for a little bit, and this is going to give some room for the Salamence to go for something, but maybe not, because that Sleep Powder is going to connect onto that Salamence and put it right to sleep.
Yeah, even without the Sun or Tailwind here, Jumpluff still just speedy, putting the Salamence to sleep. No Sucker Punch came out. I think what Jeudy was hoping for here was to bait Typhlosion into either going for that Fire Terra or switch out. Kian playing really aggressive, saying, there's just no way you actually click Sucker Punch here. And ooh, looks like he is now willing to lock into a little bit of an aggressive play. Go for that Fire Terra, just try to snipe off the King Gambit now. So for Jeudy, it's the same decision. Do you want to go for that Sucker Punch?
Yeah, because there's no Assault Vest on this King Gambit, it's going to be really vulnerable, especially looking at the Terra as well. Yes, you have an opportunity to Terra away from your Steel-type weakness, but the Dark one and the fact that you are the Black Glasses may mean that this special attack is going to do a lot to you. Knowing that there's a Fire Terra on top of that, I would be a little scared if I was that King Gambit.
Yeah, I'm curious if Jeudy decides to go for Dark Terra here. Looks like he's not going to opt for it, but I was thinking if you go for it, you can maybe get the KO onto the Jumpluff or onto the Typhlosion, even if it goes for the Terra. Tailwind's going to be set up here. Typhlosion is going to connect with that Overheat, of course. A little bit scary every time you click it because it can miss, but that is just absolutely going to demolish King Gambit here.
I mean, the Choice Specs on top of it, too. Even though you do have the -2 special attack drop, you're still going to be doing a ton, knowing that the Fire Terra as well as the Choice
wakes
Specs,
up.
Ooh, can do a little bit for that. But this Air Slash into the Jumpluff is not enough to actually knock it out here.
Interestingly enough, actually, Salamence running that Air Slash over Hurricane, one thing that we didn't call earlier, but it is just a little bit more consistent because it means you don't have to rely on Rain, right? If Salamence had Hurricane, then it feels really scary to click it because, of course, you can miss it. And so Kian manages to get that early Sleep Powder connect, but the immediate wake up here does set up Tailwind now. Typhlosion, of course, is in an awkward spot because you have two different Pokemon that resist the Overheat, right? So you probably want to switch it out, but Jumpluff here is at risk of actually getting knocked out by the Aqua Jet from Basculegion's end. And so even though Kian set up the Tailwind, this turn, I think in particular, is a little bit difficult to maneuver.
And that's exactly what Jeudy wants, is for Kian to actually stall out his own turns of Tailwind and not actually find enough value while that Tailwind is still active. And even just taking a look at maybe some of the potential switches that Kian can go for, like I think that there's still a lot of pressure just in general on the offensive side from Jody's Pokemon on the field. So we are going to see a switch out though. This Typhlosion will get a chance to reset its stat drops by going back and also click a different move later. But as you called out, that Aqua Jet into the Jumpluff, plenty to actually get the knockout there.
Yeah, this is Choice Band Basculegion, so normally you wouldn't want to lock into Aqua Jet, but really safe opportunity to go for it here. I love the King Gambit switching here. It's not really threatened by very much. And this is where I think we're really going to start paying attention to weather, right? Both of these players have choice users. Typhlosion, like, neither of them actually have brought out Torkoal or Pelipper yet, right? Because both of them are like, I just want to get one more knockout. If you, with both players now down to 3 Pokemon, if you get that KO, then you'll just have the weather advantage here, right? So this is really interesting because the Torkoal now hits the field. Basculegion obviously pressures that with Aqua Jet, so what Kian might do is switch out into the Torkoal to basically bait it. However, you also have Sucker Punch pressure with King Gambit, right? So from Jeudy's end, do you want your Basculegion to get hit by Sucker Punch? You can get around it by going for that Grass Terra, for example, and so this is a huge turn to pay attention to, in my opinion, right? Because there's a question of, do we see a switch? Does Basculegion go for that Grass Terra? Does Basculegion actually want to click that Aqua Jet? Because I think you could totally see it potentially switching out into Pelipper right now.
Ooh, well, it is going to be the Torkoal that's going to switch onto the field first. So if it was the Typhlosion on the receiving end of something like an Aqua Jet, it's not going to be doing a whole lot despite the fact that it is super effective. But we see the Terrestrialization finally committed on Jeudy's end, going over to that Basculegion, so we do end up seeing that Grass Terror type committed here.
Yeah, I think this is actually a really safe play because I think what you can go for is just Aqua Jet, Draco Meteor, double up onto the Typhlosion slot, right? That basically would get the knockout onto Typhlosion if the, now Torkoal here, yep, exactly, is just going to feint to this. And because you go for the Grass Terra here with the Basculegion, you don't have to worry about feinting from Sucker Punch. And so then Typhlosion hits the field, but then Aqua Jet will just finish it off, and you're going to be faster than King Gambit as well. I think one thing that's really important in this matchup, we see Assurance, but yep, with that Grass Terra, it's going to save it. So Typhlosion comes back out. We were talking about winning the Weather War. Well, now Torkoal's just been eliminated. Jeudy has the Pokemon advantage. You can just switch Salamence out into that Pelipper and Aqua Jet into the Typhlosion.
Yeah, this is a really well-positioned game here by Jeudy. This is, I mean, I would assume that the Pelipper is going to be the thing that's in the back here, but yeah.
Yeah, the question, I mean, Sucker Punch is stronger than that Assurance, and it looks like Basculegion
could be in range.
Yeah, but actually the problem is that you're always just going to click Aqua Jet, so there's no reason to click Sucker Punch there, yeah. And so not even actually bothering for the switch there. Confident Aqua Jet's going to KO the Typhlosion. So, yeah, you can of course switch to reset the weather, but it doesn't actually really matter that much right now if Aqua Jet's going to get the knockout anyway. So I like the decision there. Air Slash here just has a slight chance to flinch. So let's see if the King Gambit will be able to attack through here. Okay. It will. It'll get the Iron Head. Ton of damage, but does not get the knockout there onto the Salamence.
So you have the, like, how much is Aqua Jet realistically going to do to this King Gambit?
Yeah, I think at this point you just switch in the Pelipper, you get the Aqua Jet off, which is going to do a decent amount, and then with Pelipper in the back with that Focus Sash, like a Weather Ball plus like a Draco combo, I think would finish it off. But looks like Jeudy is also willing to just wait until the Pelipper hits the field, doesn't really want to switch here, and the idea is, well, Pelipper can always go for 2 different Weather Balls onto you here. But, okay, I mean, Salamence feints here. If Basculegion ends up fainting and Pelipper is the last one. Like,
that's what I was thinking.
Is there any chance King Gambit survives the Weather Ball? Like, I don't know. I think I would have liked to see the Pelipper switch in a little bit sooner, but maybe Jody's just confident that, and maybe it's not even Pelipper. Maybe it's actually Archaludon.
Archaludon in the back. Well, there's no Tailwind on the board anymore.
Okay,
but
it is
Pelipper. I would have been that would have been the big brain like 5-head play, thinking like 3 universes into the future. But it is the Pelipper, and so this Pelipper does have access to the Hurricane and Weather Ball as its 2 attacking moves. But it's still like you're still looking at a Steel type.
Yeah, I think Weather Ball here should get the knockout. I was just wondering, you know, if this is there any world in which King Gambit is actually bulky enough to survive? Because if so, then you can just go for, say, Assurance into Sucker Punch here, right? I'm going to guess the answer is no. I think Jeudy probably would have switched in that Pelipper a little bit sooner for that Salamence. He was confident enough, if I just get guaranteed damage on a Gambit, I'm confident that my Weather Ball will KO. But if there's a world, you know, normally King Gambit, you're just going to run, like, max HP, max attack investment. If there was a world where it had, like, a ton of special defense investment, maybe. But I think Pelipper, with that Weather Ball here, should just get the knockout.
I think Kian's already kind of thinking ahead to, how do I adjust this for game number 2?
Yeah.
The fact that the Torkoal had to go down, or Kian was even pushed into a position where he needed to sort of switch things in, maybe disadvantageously, that's certainly something to have to think about there. But Pelipper does take a good amount of damage from that Sucker Punch, but it's the Weather Ball in return from this Pelipper plenty to get the KO. So we're going to a game number 2.
Yeah, so I think like Jody's decision to basically not switch into Pelipper at any given point was saying, well, I don't want you to go for an Assurance like onto a Salamence slot as I switch in Pelipper, because then suddenly I'm just going to get knocked out by Sucker Punch. So what I'm going to do is basically just keep whittling away at your King Gambit to put it in Weather Ball KO range, which I think makes a ton of sense there. And so, you know, when you're confident on your damage calcs, just knowing exactly how much damage to do to get a knockout onto something is really key. And I think that was a really fun game to watch. I think like Kian was able to get the knockout onto Jeudy's King Gambit early, but like had to commit so many resources to do so, right? And the priority from that Basque Legion was able to basically kind of neutralize the tailwind from the opposing end. And Kian just didn't have that many opportunities to actually attack very frequently here.
Yeah, I was going to call out, too, that, like, the Salamence even at the very end, where we were in the last couple of turns, I love that Jeudy was like, you can either knock this out or I can knock it out myself with the Life Orb recoil, and you also have that small increased crit chance for the Draco Meteor. Maybe you just finish the job that way, and you don't necessarily have to roll the dice on the Weather Ball if you weren't 100% confident, but I really love that. And I think you're right, though, about the fact that Kian was not able to actually utilize enough of this Typhlosion. The Protect also under the King Gambit was so smart because you get a chance to also fish out what is that Choice Specs move going to be, and was there maybe ever an opportunity for this Typhlosion to do something else? Heat Wave or Shadow Ball Eruption is tough to go for, knowing that you do have a Sucker Punch King Gambit on the other side, but Heat Wave is still on the table.
Yeah, it's funny. I was really interested in seeing like Dragonite versus Archaladon in this matchup. Neither of those Pokemon actually ended up coming out. I think Dragonite would have been an awesome lead for Kian into Jody's team, and his lead combo in particular. If you wanted to adjust here and you think the same thing is coming out, Dragonite makes a lot of sense because you have that Ice Spinner to pressure Salamence, and you've got the low kick to pressure the King Gambit slot. And so it's a little bit surprised to not see that come out. I'm wondering if Kian wants to maybe think about adjusting into it. I think Typhlosion here is just a tough one because it pressures, sure, into King Gambit, into Amoonguss, into Archaladon, but like Salamence, Pelipper in particular, I think is just a tough Pokemon for Kian's team to deal with, right? Because it can actually deal really consistent damage across the board. Glamora, honestly, another really interesting Pokemon here. Like, Kian can consider maybe dropping the Typhlosion and going something like Jumpluff, Dragonite, Jumpluff, Glamora as the lead instead. You can maybe still have Typhlosion in the back, for example, but yeah, I think like Typhlosion basically was caught into a really awkward spot because it was facing down King Gambit immediately, and so essentially like Kian was playing from behind just from the lead, so I think I'd like to see maybe some lead adjustments here. Dragonite, I think, yeah, being a really interesting option, and like I said, I'm wondering if Jeudy maybe wants to consider bringing that Archaladon, but his Pokemon selection in that last game felt pretty perfect.
It really did. So I wonder if we do actually end up seeing the Archaladon. I feel like it's a tough bring because, as you were calling out before, you have the Grass Terra, but there are multiple ways that you're able to deal with that, despite the fact that Glamora would end up being something that deals that super effective damage. Well, Aaron, you wanted to see the Dragonite, and so it is going to be in the lead here for Kian in this game number 2.
Yeah, I think it's a great adjustment. Dragonite just exerts so much offensive pressure against so much of Jody's team as well. This is, of course, the bulky set. The Basque Legion here is in an interesting spot. You are up against 2 different Pokemon that, of course, resist water, and your Last Respects isn't going to be very powerful either. So you think that Basque Legion probably just wants to pivot out right now. Kian is now the one exerting a ton of offensive pressure. You've got the super effective attacks into the King Gambit slot, but you can see Kian's toying around with the idea of trying to make this aggressive prediction, because the idea is, I think that your Basque Legion is at huge risk right now. You can't protect with it. I'm going to target that slot and just play really aggressively, and King Gambit does go for the protect, but we know that Kian, of course, didn't launch that low kick into that slot.
Yeah, well, it's going to be the Sleep Powder into the King Gambit's Protect, so you're not going to end up being able to grab that this time around. But with the flip turn, that Basque Legion is going to get out of there, dealing a little bit of chip damage to this Jumpluff and allowing Jeudy to pivot into something else. So we will see the 3rd Pokemon that he's brought to this game number 2.
The Salamence. We saw the Ice Spinner click into that slot, but it's Archaladon. So we were just talking about this. Both of the Dragons have come out. I'm very happy to see them make an appearance here. The Ice Spinner here not going to be able to snipe off a potential Salamence switch in, and of course Archaladon will get a defense boost here immediately. Kian still has a lot of pressure, though. This Encore is a really, really big deal, and this Jumpluff, I think, is just kind of a nuisance to deal with in general, right? So now the question is, if you're Jeudy, do you want to switch that King Gambit out into the Basque Legion, which, of course, would be immune to the low kick here? A lot of different options. I mean, Gambit, of course, could go for, like, a Terra as well to just get around the 4x super effective hit. Consider going for something like a double up onto the Dragonite slot. You can Draco Meteor plus, for example, go for an Assurance here, but I think if you're Jeudy, you might be a little bit scared to switch and have something come in and just eat up the Sleep Powder immediately.
Yeah, I really love the Assault Vest Dragonite variant right now because it is something that I feel like does put a huge wrench into a lot of people's plans. Despite maybe seeing some of the choice band, the Assault Vest allows you to change up your move selection, which makes it all the more threatening to something like this Archaludon. You could see Kian maybe trying to go through the dice a little bit of like, okay, do I call the Terra? Do I try to go for the Ice Spinner instead? Do I try to get the low kick to even just force it out? But we are going to end up seeing this Dark Terrestrialization on his Jumpluff.
Yeah, I'm curious about the Dark Terra. I think the idea is it covers for King Gambit basically staying in that spot. And here is the Terra coming out. Kian did go for Ice Spinner once again into Archaludon, so that now will deal super effective damage. Of course, going for the Grass Terra here saves you against the Sleep Powder if it were to target into that slot. And so some quick Terras here from both players. Jumpluff is going to set up the Tailwind, so good speed control now for the next couple of turns. And this Dragonite's still sitting, quite healthy. Another Ice Spinner comes out, now dealing super effective damage into Archaludon. And, for a non-boosted Ice Spinner, like this is no choice band, you've gotten some pretty solid damage off now into Archaludon. Archaludon can't protect this next turn, right? And so a double up can just finish it off.
It can. Though tough, well, especially when you think about the Jumpluff being able to do something with the special attack damage. Yes, you have to deal with the Assault Vest, but Jumpluff will be sticking around one more turn at least in order to try to get a Sleep Powder or just do something on the field. The only problem is that this Dragonite, these physical attacks into this Archaludon, this stamina boosts are really going to start to protect it.
Totally, yeah. There's some interesting things you can do here. One thing I was thinking was like you pivot Dragonite out into Torkoal and then you Encore the Archaludon into the Electro Shot. But then it's like, how are you actually knocking out Archaludon next turn anyway? Okay, yeah, there's the Encore. Yeah, okay.
No way.
It would be interesting because the scary thing here is you don't know where the Electro Shot is going. But yeah, we're going to see that move being locked in. So, okay, I'm a fan.
I love this. That's so funny. I feel like you can almost always expect that maybe the Electroshot goes into the Dragonite slot just because you know that it can't protect. But the fact that we're going to see the Torkoal hit the field, Jeudy's one step ahead, going to be removing the Pelipper so that it can be preserved for later, as it's the King Gambit that's going to take its slot.
All right. Well, there's the Encore. So we're going to see just the special attack boost this turn, but of course Archaludon will still get to launch the Electroshot in the subsequent turn, right? Like you said, if it's going into that Dragonite slot, this poor Torkoal is still just going to get absolutely obliterated. So that's why I was like, this is a cool play. Now the question is, where do we go from here, right? Yeah, do you just protect this turn, for example? Yeah. And like you said, with those stamina defense boosts, like this Archaludon has taken a lot of damage, but it still hasn't actually fainted yet. So, and like another Ice Spinner won't KO either. I think like the awkward thing about the Pokemon selection here for Kian is like, how are you actually dealing enough damage, right? It's mainly going to come from Dragonite. And I do think Dragonite and King Gambit in combination are very, very good into Jeudy's team, but you have to clear the Archaludon right now. So, okay, we're just going to see the overheat here. Sleep Powder does connect as well.
Ooh, so that's a really big deal. This King Gambit's not going to be able to do anything on this turn. It's going to end up taking its mandatory turn of sleep as the Electro Shot is going to target into that Torkoal that was the Dragonite. Cannot believe the survival right now, which means that the Torkoal can actually go for the overheat.
Oh,
the
that's
Archaludon
such a clutch survival. Oh my goodness. Wow. You can see Kian was even checking the stats of that Torkoal before saying, you know what, I think I'm going to survive the Electro Shot there. I really wasn't confident. I mean, that's a very powerful attack, but able to get the knockout. And with that eject pack, you now switch out as well, so you can get a free switch in back into that Dragonite or that final Pokemon, which is the King Gambit. Being able to connect on that Sleep Powder is also a really big deal, right? Because one of the things that you have to pay attention to in this matchup is the King Gambit versus King Gambit War. Jeudy has a big advantage because of that low kick on his King Gambit. So Gambit on Jeudy's end now will take that first turn of sleep. Kian now threatens the King Gambit slot, of course, with low kick. Basque Legion, I think, a really natural switch in here. What you can, of course, do then is switch the King Gambit into Pelipper. But if you do that, you are still at risk of Kian, for example, potentially switching out the Jumpluff here. Jumpluff also could just, go for a Leaf Storm into Basque Legion. What's also interesting here is how like the speed interactions will work, right? Because if you were just normally you would try to like predict Pelipper coming in, but the problem is that King Gambit's slower than Dragonite. So, but we don't see any switches. Okay,
it's just gonna wake up.
Oh, but that's a protect. That's not a sucker punch. So is it Aqua Jet coming out right now? It is.
Okay, so that is going to remove one of the bigger threats there. That Leaf Storm would have done some really big damage to that Basket Legion had it been able to connect. And so that is going to be the jump fluff removed. Tailwind's going to expire soon as well. So that is something that you will be able to get on your Bastion Legion side if that Pelipper switches back in to activate the Swift Swim. But this is another turn that Jeudy has bought himself.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge wake-up on Gambit. Given that it didn't switch out into Pelipper, it would have just fainted. And so, you know, that's the downside of using Jump Fluff. It can miss with Sleep Powder immediately, and then, like, the sleep rolls aren't amazing. But I think Kian's still in an amazing spot because now you have two things that just threaten for super effective damage, right? And you still got Torkoal in the back. So Kian here, I think, should be able to get a knockout this turn. This Basket Legion is locked into Choice Band Aqua Jet, right? So you would think that it's going to want to switch out into La Pelipper. I'm curious if you just say, you know what, I'm going to stay in here. I don't even think you're going to click Sucker Punch into me. I'm actually going to switch the King Gambit out. But I think Kian still has a really big lead despite the King Gambit on Jody's and getting an early wake up. It is just going to be Basket Legion making the safe switch here, though.
All right, so the Pelipper now revealing itself again. It still has that Focus Sash intact, so you will need to double into it in order to actually remove it from the field. As it's the low kick that moves first, this King Gambit, 4 times effective, did not stand a chance. And so Jeudy in this game number 2 is down to his final 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, and I think the game's just over, honestly. I mean, Assurance here also a really nice play. No need to go for that Sucker Punch, right? It doesn't really make sense to go for Sucker Punch because Basket Legion would be clicking Aqua Jet anyway, so it wouldn't even work. So Assurance always safe to go for into that slot. Also just damages the Pelipper. Now you can just go for a safe Sucker Punch into the Pelipper slot here. And I love the Torkoal switch in here as well. Basically, like, the Basket Legion can't close out this game because it wants to click Last Respects, but if you're clicking Last Respects, then of course the King Gambit is going to resist it. If you click your Water type attack, well, Torkoal just switches in, and then the Water type damage is just too low. So Dragonite was the key piece there. I was saying, I don't think Hisuian Typhlosion is really that powerful. Kian brought it, and then with that Encore play, being able to like bait out the Terra from the Archaludon and then get rid of it is huge. And I think having played against Kian before, his playstyle was incredibly aggressive. He is willing to just go all in on the prediction sometimes, and it looks so good when it pays off, and I think he made a lot of great predictions in that one.
There was also really great pressure onto just like getting the Archaludon to Terrastallize anyway, so even though you ended up seeing the Ice Spinner into that slot is a fantastic call. You know now that that Terrastallialization is no longer available for anything else on Jody's team. So
100%. Really
really great pin there. And then that survival was crazy. That was at +1 already because of the previous Electro shot.
Totally, yeah. I think...
Or plus two actually, when it actually ended up
Which is why I was shocked. I thought
off.
Torkoal would be going down there for sure. And it survived with, like, I think a decent amount of age, like 18 HP or something like that as well. So that to me was the key turn. Yeah, because I think if Torkoal goes down there, well, then Archaludon still isn't just threatened by a knockout, right? The problem is that Jump Wolf can't touch it. Neither King Gambit nor Dragonite will get a one-hit knockout onto it from the range that it's at. We're just going into game 3 here. So same leads here from Kian, but Amoonguss has now hit the field.
Okay, so the Amoonguss it's really interesting because it's going to be one of the slower things in this game outside of the Torkoal, which is going to be slower than it, but where do you see the Amoonguss kind of fitting in here? You know, at the very least, it's not going to be able to actually get put to sleep because of its grass typing, but maybe you try to get this Dragonite to throw an Ice Spinner at it.
Yeah, I think the Amoonguss lead is really smart if you're expecting Jump Fluff Dragonite again, because this Dragonite cannot protect, and Kian doesn't have a safe switch into Sleep Powder, right? The Grass-type Pokemon is already out in the field. So with this lead, you can always Sleep Powder into the Dragonite slot and neutralize it so much more. I think this is a fantastic adjustment by Jeudy.
We're even going to see a Terrastallialization committed as well. It is going to be onto the King Gambit, and so that is going to end up being that Dark Terror type. It could still get put to sleep here. That is something that still threatens that Pokemon, but if not, then you're dealing like a silly amount of damage now.
Sleep Powder connects once again, though, so Kian is 3 for 3 on hitting those when going for it. King Gambit now will fall asleep immediately. The Terra there just covers for low kick going into that slot. Ice Spinner does do a lot of damage there, but Amoonguss will be able to heal back up and critically this time now put the Dragonite to sleep. So a lot of sleep going around right now.
Yeah, it also looks like maybe with a Citrus Berry recovery, that could be something like a 3-hit knockout as well. So that Amoonguss is certainly around for a while. And with Regenerator, if you remove it from the field, then it's even closer to full HP for later on in the game. But this is a huge deal, especially because that Dragonite was so oppressive in that game number 1. You're hoping for a couple turns of sleep here as well to allow your King Gambit to wake up.
Totally, yeah. And I think this is a really smart adjustment, right? Like, what is King Gambit and Amoonguss weak to? Well, Hisuian Typhlosion. But are you really going to bring Hisuian Typhlosion, especially after that game 1? Likely not, right?
Probably not.
Really good call out here. Encore onto Lamungus. Like, this is a really awkward dance right now where both players are really just trying to wake up as quickly as possible. King Gambit does wake up immediately. That is huge, I think, especially because Jeudy has already burnt a turn to sleep as well. Gonna go right into the jump bluff, and that's just a one-hit KO.
And you really don't mind your Amoonguss actually getting encored right now into that Spore, because as you said, no matter what else kind of comes in, it's not gonna want to take this Spore either.
Yeah, and we see it is Gambit and Torkoal in the back, so there isn't something like that Glamora, which has Grass Terra, which of course would be able to resist or be immune to the Spore here. So Torkoal now hits the field, but the problem is, like, Dragonite hasn't even taken that many turns of sleep yet either, right? So, yeah, a lot of early wake-ups immediately from these sleep powders, and I think, yeah, Jeudy is off to a really, really strong start here. And the Dark Terror on Gambit, I think, yeah, just nice both offensively and defensively, right? If the sleep powder missed, then Kowtow Cleave would just knock out the jump bluff, and it just covers for low kick, yeah, which otherwise would be, of course, 4 times super effective.
Yeah, we saw that was just a one-hit knockout the last time that ended up happening. So nice to know that that King Gambit might be around for a little bit longer. The Amoonguss is going to go back into its Pokeball, though. Now it gets that Regenerator healing, and it's going to be the Pelipper that comes out. Torkoal's only attack options are Overheat and Fissure. So at the very least, you are going to mitigate some of that overheat damage, but it's the Dragonite that stays asleep and makes it so vulnerable. The low kick into the Torkoal, though, maybe hoping that the King Gambit would have switched into that slot, as look at how little damage that overheat's going to do in the rain. Yeah,
I mean, Kowtow Cleave obviously would have done significantly more there, and this does buy a turn. I mean, you do get the free switch in now into the King Gambit, which is waiting in the back. I'm curious if Kian's low kick can get a one-hit knockout onto Jeudy's King Gambit from this range. I think, like, Dragonite still needs to wake up right now, right? The problem is it's burnt a couple turns of sleep, but yeah, this is still a scary turn, right? Because if your Dragonite stays asleep, okay, considering the normal Terror with extreme speed right now, I don't know if that's enough to knock out the King Gambit is the thing. Like, King Gambit is a very bulky Pokemon.
Yeah, and are you okay actually going to a normal Terra knowing that, like, Pelipper still has Weather Ball?
Yeah, I think, like, Kian's probably saying, well, look, I want to, yeah, just try to maximize damage output here. I think the scary thing here is your Gambit could just go down to low kick from the opposing side if you're not knocking out the opposing Gambit right now, right? Kian also might be making a read saying, well, I don't think you're actually going to target my Gambit with low kick this turn. I'm also curious how the Gambits interact in terms of speed.
Yes, that is something that we don't know, and right now, King Gambit's speed investment is all over the place. So it's certainly something that might come into play.
Dragonite does wake up,
It does wake up for some damage. It's going to be using the extreme speed with that extra boost from that normal Terror, and that certainly puts King Gambit into the range of being able to get knocked out, but it's the Hurricane right back at it. Still not going to do a whole lot, but it also does not get confused.
Yeah, so it was the Kowtow Cleave. It wasn't low kick here into Dragonite. Dragonite does survive with 9 HP. Iron Head now comes out, does knock out the opposing King Gambit, so Kian is still definitely in this one. Really, really clutch survival and wake up there from the Dragonite, but there is still this Amoonguss in the back.
Yeah, and that Amoonguss is going to have almost full HP thanks to the fact that it does have that ability. So when you see it hit the field, it's still something that you're going to have to be a little worried about. That's where the Asalphus Dragonite can certainly come into play. You know that it's still going to be around to switch up its move rather than just being locked into that extreme speed.
Yeah, extreme speed Assurance here, though, a great combination. Of course, Assurance will do more damage if the Pokemon has already taken damage that turn.
And Amoonguss can't protect.
That's right, exactly. So this is a very safe, guaranteed play. My question is there any chance Amoonguss is bulky enough to survive this combo? No way, based on that damage.
It does not seem to look like that. It even has to go for the Rage Powder after it because of that priority. Extreme Speed goes first. And what a great call, because this Dragonite is certainly going down to that Weather Ball. And so it's going to be up to this King Gambit to try to help even up the score again.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by Kian finding a path back into this game. It felt really rough with the Amoonguss lead, but that wake up and the Dragonite survival so clutch. And Kian now will win the Weather War. However, if the last one is Archaludon on Jody's end, I think Jody's still in a phenomenal spot because you can just body press into the King Gambit. So Torkoal's going to come out. Kian will have the weather advantage, but what is the final Pokemon? If it is that Archaludon, this could come down to Fissure, folks.
Oh, no. Well, that would be a very exciting way to potentially end this game.
Oh, okay. protect overheat. One of the other things you can do right now if you're Jeudy is just like double up onto the Torkoal slot, for example, right? Because you're thinking, well, you know, King Gambit here won't get a one-hit knockout onto either Pokemon. So how spooked are you about the Fissure? Fissure is actually not what we end up seeing this turn. The idea is to do enough damage to Pelipper where maybe Sucker Punch can finish it off. But it is Draco Meteor, no body press coming out. Torkoal does survive, so is it the Weather Ball?
It is.
Double up into the Torkoal. Jeudy calls it correctly, and that'll secure him the win.
It will, because at this point too, your special attack doesn't matter anymore because you're using the body press. So that Draco Meteor was so safe, despite the fact that it does lower your special attack by 2 stages. What a phenomenal play. And even the Weather Ball as well from Pelipper, that's a fire type now. King Gambit doesn't really want to take that either.
Yeah, like, I think this was always going to be pretty tough for Kian to win anyway. We would have had to make like multiple predictions correctly. Body Press actually not knocking out the King Gambit, which is a testament to its bulk, but because of Archaludon just threatening both Pokemon with so much damage, it's really, really tough. And so this was such a fun set because of the adjustments we saw, right? On Kian's end, bringing out that Dragonite. On Jody's end, getting rid of the Salamence and then bringing out Amoonguss in this Game 3. I think so much of what this set felt like was who had the advantage from the lead, and it felt like whoever did have the advantage just had a huge, huge advantage and was able to play well enough to execute that advantage to a victory.
I think this match also is a perfect example of why this regulation is also so fun. We saw 11 out of the 12 Pokemon between these two players, which I think is something that maybe a couple of regulations ago or a couple of months ago would not have happened.
100%, yeah. I think both teams just have so many different modes that work for them, right? And one of the tough things about Pokemon in best of 3 play is thinking about what your opponent is going to do to adjust, right? So in Game 2, it felt like Kian figured out, well, okay, you know, Dragonite is kind of the missing piece. And then in Game 3, Jeudy realized, well, if you don't lead that Typhlosion, Amoonguss is actually really, really good into your team. And you know, this Amoonguss was Steel Terra, so it actually was incredibly weak into Typhlosion, right? You can't go for something like a Water Terra just to survive the Fire type damage. And so if Kian had actually adjusted back to Typhlosion, it could have given the Amoonguss Gambit adjustment, you know, more trouble. But in this case, Amoonguss is led and is just able to get that score.
Amoonguss being Steel Terra, I'm like, Ursaluna, any Ursaluna enjoyers? That's definitely one way to help you versus something like Facade, but it ended up working out fantastic in this case too. Like, I would not have expected the Amoonguss to come at all because of the Terra, like you said, and so maybe like a little bit of conditioning after that first game of like, well, how are you gonna make this Typhlosion work? It was just a little too slow to function.
Yeah, Typhlosion is such an interesting one. I think the pressure of Gambit's Sucker Punch alone is really tough for it, because you're essentially forced to go for that Terra, it feels like. And there's no, you know, Rage Powder on the jump buff on the opposing side as well. And so Typhlosion just exerts so much offensive pressure, but it's checked by King Gambit. Typhlosion then needs the Terra just to get around getting KO'd by Sucker Punch, right? And so would have been a tough Pokemon to bring into that one. Let's quickly take a look at Jody's player profile. I mean, he has been on an absolute tear in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and you noted at like kind of the beginning of the history with the 2014 Worlds finalist. That was really interesting to see. That team actually had like a Tyranitar. So that was really cool just to see how also Jeudy has evolved over the last couple of years to implement weather on a lot of the teams that he actually has finishes for on this graphic.
I can't remember the last time Jeudy did not make day 2. Like, I think he's basically just the lights out. Is always fighting in day 2, always in top cut contention, it feels like, all the way until the very end. Obviously, it has some really big finishes with that Worlds finalist, San Diego top 4, NAIC top 8, right? He's been in the top 8 of all of the major tournaments that really exist, but hasn't actually captured that title. I know he's so hungry for it, and his play in this last one was immaculate. So we'll see if he's gonna be able to, you know, keep converting that momentum. But getting a win against such a good player like Kian's gotta feel good. And, you know, making adjustments the way he did, bringing that Amoonguss in Game 3. Amoonguss can be scary to bring into a team that has Typhlosion and Torkoal. So a lot of conviction with that decision, and it paid off.
I mean, look at last year. We had a couple of longtime players that finally got their very first regional wins. So I feel like it's not out of the question here for Jeudy in 2024 to really do the same.
It's one of those that like feels like a long time coming. It's like not if
or
it's
like
gonna do it, but it's
that
when.
He hasn't yet.
Totally, yeah. But I think, you know, this game at a high level, when you make it to top cut, it's kind of just about the momentum that you get, right? Do you run into the right matchups? Are you just like playing well in those games? All it takes is one mistake to get eliminated from top cut. So win, you know, an entire tournament, you just need to kind of get 3 or 4 victories in a row, and that can be really difficult no matter who you are, right? It's about, and anything can happen. So Jeudy is obviously good enough to be champion, right? It's more just, can you stream along together a bunch of victories all at the right time? But yeah, it feels inevitable, honestly, and so I'm excited to see when he's going to be able to take that title.
Couple of stars may need to align, but no problem for this player. We've got an interview with Jeudy Azzarelli over with Dwee, so let's go ahead and hear what he has to say about the match we just watched.
Thank you so much, Rose and Aaron. I am joined in the lounge right now with the winner of Swiss Round 2, Jeudy Azzarelli. Jeudy, how are you feeling right now?
Oh, I'm feeling good. I mean, a win is better than a loss, right? But there's still a lot of tournaments to be played, so I'm just happy to be where I'm at in the moment.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you thought about going into the matchup? This is a very classic matchup right here, Rain versus Sun, especially a more unconventional Sun. We don't really see Jump Puff too often. How did you go about navigating through that matchup?
So it's kind of funny. So Kian, when I saw that team, I immediately went Joseph Ugarde, because that's a similar team I played at Nationals NAIC 2023. So I had the flashback happen. I know that they're good friends. I'm like, I gotta block in. But it's a classic weather war, Pelipper versus Torkoal, and it's just about, you know, getting your weather in and making sure that you're in the best position.
Yeah, and you definitely played that super well. I mean, it seemed like at all times you kind of had the weather control there. Can you tell us a little bit more about your team? Do you have any cool tricks that you want to talk about? I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to.
So the team I'm running is actually from Taro Okada, a Japanese player, really strong. And I basically had a team crisis this entire week. I was using Typhlosion Sun, I was using Kingdra Rain, and I was using like this freaky deaky Sneasler team. And then the night before, I looked at what I had in my box, and it was like, I don't feel comfortable with any of these. I've played Rain before, let me just go with this.
It seemed like you did pretty well. Like you said, you had so many different teams that you could possibly lock in. How are you currently feeling about Regulation H right now?
It is so wide open. I think the way I like to think of it is like, it's as wide as like Regulation G had so many archetypes, but there's nothing that feels like, hey, that's doing a little too much damage. Like, there's no Calirexes in the format. So it's like a nice power level, but there's so many teams you have to prep for.
Do you find that a little bit intimidating, the fact that there's so many different teams? I mean, there's so many different viable Pokemon, there's so many different viable teams. Like, how do you go into preparing for that, for this tournament? So
you kind of, as a top player, you have to accept that you can't win every matchup, and you have to dodge those bad ones, right? So I decided I'm just not gonna play like lower usage comps, and hopefully I just play a lot of the more common stuff I'm familiar with. But that's usually how you have to take it in every format. You can't beat every team, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So many Pokemon.
That's great words of wisdom from a very top player. Jeudy, I'm going to go ahead and let you go back and prepare for the next Swiss round. Do you have any shout-outs that you want to give out to any of the friends or family watching from home? Your mom, possibly?
Yes, my mom. Also my sister, because I know that she's also going to be watching this, so hello. Hope that you guys are doing well. You guys supported me all throughout Hawaii. I love you guys so much. Shout out to Lynn, who got my Mons at like midnight. So when I was looking at the box, I was looking at the box of Mons that he had. I was like, this, that. So shout out to Lynn, you got all my Mons. Shout out to all my friends at Tub, my Final Fantasy 14 friends, all of those guys. Honestly, also shout out, someone just gave me a cool Switch bag. I mentioned I wanted it one time and they just got it for me, so shout out to that guy. And yeah, thank you all for supporting me.
Thank you so much, Jeudy. We're going to go ahead and throw it to a quick break, but when we come back, more action here from the 2025 Pokemon Regional Championships in Baltimore.